All right, everyone. Trump has issued a proclamation, link in the description, archived, of course, that it is now Columbus Day again. The government will not be doing the Indigenous bullcrap day. And it is bullcrap. And I've come to the conclusion that it's even more bullcrap than originally. Originally, it was like, there's no reason to change it. Columbus wasn't even from the United States. I understand that because it didn't exist yet. And was a European explorer. He never technically set foot on the continental United States at all, though I believe he set foot in Puerto Rico as a territory, so I guess that counts in a roundabout way. He also went to Panama, made the big mistake of not following the natives down there that told him, yeah, the passage you're looking for, it's basically just over these hills. And he said, I think he was sick at the time, so he decided not to make the trek. He would have ended up at the Pacific Ocean. So, whoops. And then he got put back in Europe in shackles, actually, for mismanagement after his people started to mutiny, actually. But I do agree with reinstating this. I've noted the main focus of the wokies, and this is an argument that I don't see made enough. Their main argument is celebrating Columbus is a bad thing because of colonialism. They abused natives and, gave them diseases on purpose, even though they didn't have the concept of germ theory, and stuff like that. They were just abusive, terrible people. And they engage in the noble savage mythology as a cover for this by saying, before the white man came with his firewater and started enslaving everyone to find gold that in some cases didn't even exist, ignoring a bunch of other resources of great value in the process in many cases, by the way, when they do that, they're being wrong because they weren't noble savages. It's a romanticist revision. This is revisionism. The real revisionism comes from the 1800s, where you've got all those pictures of like the proud brave. And so it was a reaction to what was seen as the degradation of the old world with its little forests and carts and stuff like that, and the rise of things like steam engines and coal-powered everything and soot and chimney sweeps and all the stuff that you see in especially industrial England and other parts of developed Europe at the time, which of course became a thing as well in more developed areas of what became the United States eventually. Anyway, this is wrong. Those tribes were constantly at war with one another. They wiped each other out and scalped each other and bashed each other's skulls in, and they fought over land and they fought over women and they enslaved one another and had every single vice, including the drug use, although not alcohol at the time, yeah, not yet. They really took on a taste for that sometimes. They were doing the exact same thing. So why is it that with Indigenous Peoples Day, which I have no problem if you want to celebrate it, why is it that you don't focus on the colonial history of those native groups, the abuse, the rape, the enslaving, and so forth of those groups? They were doing the same thing on a generally smaller scale due to lower population density, maybe yes, and due to lower technological aptitude, but they were still doing it. They wiped one another out on a regular basis. Sometimes entire tribes disappeared. Well, they didn't need the Europeans to come to tell them how to do that. So why is it that the one holiday that you want to celebrate because, Idpol and stuff, you're going to gloss over all of the negative aspects and embrace the noble savage mythology? The doppelganger would be if Columbus Day were White People Day, effectively. European Diaspora Day. We're only going to talk about the good things that European diaspora have done, and we're not going to acknowledge any of this other stuff. When you go to school, you are taught that the early explorers generally were scumbags, and the people that were oppressed are always cast off as being violated terribly. They were so much better off before, and the Europeans are uniquely abusive in nature, and so you only focus on the negative when you're talking about Columbus. But you'll only focus on the positive when you're talking about some tribal chieftain who ordered 1,000 people executed for his own shits and giggles, because those sorts of things were happening when the Spanish cut down and into the indigenous lands, and they quickly found plenty of allies because there were a few empires there that really loved human sacrifice. They also apparently they took thorns, strung it through their tongues, and would rub it back and forth to bleed all over the altar and like stuff like that. Okay, you can say, well, we have to appreciate that culture. Well, then why don't you have to appreciate European norms? Why is it that only one group of people is singled out over and over and over again? Let's ask that particular question. There are a number of different answers, all of them being partially correct. The fact is that Indigenous Peoples Day is celebrating a group of people and whitewashing them, pun intended, to make them look like saints. And therefore, this other group of people that came over and did do terrible things, they're the devils, but they're unique devils. It's to the exclusion of any other group of people ever engaging in a massacre, dragging off children, burning villages, conquesting one another. I mean, it's not just colonialism when white people do it now, is it? When another country, and you could say that those tribal regions effectively operated like countries, they just weren't as centrally organized in every case. When they went to war, oftentimes it was for territory and resources, colonizing the land of other people that were distinct from themselves. They spoke various languages, they had various sub-religious beliefs. The idea that they all smoked the wampum and sat around talking about the Great Spirit and shit like that is a mythology. It was invented in the 1800s, which and it's not surprised because, around the same time you're getting like Marxism and shit like that. So I'm not surprised that the far, far left would enjoy such a thing. If you want to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day, though, you should crack open a history textbook sometime that does not whitewash the situation. And you will see all of the same vices were present before Europeans were there. All of the same virtues were there. Some Europeans, prior to that period, they were like, well, these, people, they're barely more developed than the black folks, and they would say the barbarians, basically. They said, well, they're semi-civilized, and stuff like that. They had a very weird categorical system back then. Just look at the one the Spanish were employing even after that. Makes the Nazis look relatively progressive by comparison, which is another thing that people don't seem to understand, especially if they got a U.S. public education. The fact is, though, I mean, you should celebrate the good things and then you should acknowledge the bad things that happen and then say, well, sorry for that, but it happened like, 500 fucking years ago. So it really has no basis on my modern existence. And celebrating people to the exclusion of being able to criticize them. Like when you point out, hey, these so-called native tribes that crossed the Bering were killing each other in the regular long, long, long before any European set foot. Leif Erikson hadn't set foot there, even if we admit to the possibility of medieval Irish explorers, and it seems that there is that's possibly the case. It's maybe we know that the Vikings got there. We're not sure about the Irish explorers, although some of those tales they kind of fit in with a certain timeline, so it's possible. I've often wondered if those stone cairns around New England weren't made by, Irish people that generally would have died off probably. They weren't made by native tribes. We know that. That's why they won't let them excavate near them for the most part. They're claimed as native remains without any evidence that there are any native remains there. That's another thing. The hampering of science has played a role as well. The fact is, though, that you've got this mythological situation where all harm that's ever been caused on the history of the earth has always been the result of European people who are uniquely ignorant and warlike. And everyone else just got along, and China, they never had civil wars or anything like that, never overran nearby countries, never had any feuds or anything like that. Ignore that. No, we're going to talk about bamboo feng shui and stuff like that. I guess the only European group right now that enjoys that special status, I suppose, is Ukrainians to an extent. So yeah, the noble savage thing is bullshit. And I congratulate Trump on ordering this particular proclamation because it's the right thing to do. The government does not need to take part in romanticist whitewashing of history, which is literally what the indigenous peoples thing is. Nobody's trying to whitewash Christopher Columbus. We all know that he fucked up on multiple occasions. We all know about the slavery and the brutality of him and the people that came with him. Everyone knows that. We were taught in school. We were never or rarely taught anything about all of the genocidal activities that happened long before the Europeans ever set foot in the goddamn continent. That's about all. Peace out.